that break that felt a little longer to me than typical. So again, we're going to be talking about social, emotional, behavioral techniques and strategies, and really focusing on what you as a teacher can do to really change the practices within your classroom, or if you are working directly with general education teachers, how you can have some information that you can share with those general education teachers and some techniques for them to improve the practices in their environment as well. So really what we want to learn today is having knowledge and awareness of what the HLPs are for 6 to 10 for social and emotional and behavioral. And then looking at positive relationships as foundational to positive student behavior. And I know that's something that we all know. Again, HLPs are always something new, but good reminders on what our everyday practice should look like. Note the impact of the environment on student behavior and how that can improve the probability of positive student behavior. Understand the importance of timely, meaningful feedback with corrective action. And then really gaining knowledge of tools to support conducting an FBA and developing a BIP for the small percentage of students who need more, who aren't going to be successful with what we have set up in our current Tier 1 environments. What are we going to do for those students? And what are some tools that can help us do that efficiently and do it well? So how many of you, just show of hands or thumbs up in the chat, are familiar with Rita Pearson? Okay, I see some hands raising. Nice. All right. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead because I truly feel that each time I watch this, it's a motivating factor. So even if you've seen it before, it's the new year. We may feel refreshed now, but sometimes we just need some motivation to get us through. And this reminds us who we are to the students that we serve and how we can be most impactful. And then I'm going to pull tidbits from this presentation throughout our session this morning. So I also need, Todd, if you can give me a thumbs up that you're hearing it. Perfect. Okay. Enjoy.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good. Some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. I said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class because I am the best teacher and you are the best students. They put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise. You just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on his paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids to, it didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection. It's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
All right. I know several of you have seen that before. I just think it is such a powerful message and so uplifting. And there is so much truth in everything that she says. Like, oftentimes I just find myself watching it and I get this smirk on my face because, oh, yeah, I'm thinking of a student that I'm connecting with when she says, your difficult kids are never absent. Yep, I have a couple in mind, and I'm sure you do as well. Any other connections from you all, whether you want to unmute or just type in the chat, something that resonated with you within the video?
I guess when she said +2, I can't remember. I'm gonna have to pay more attention when I grade things. I always put plus how many over a number, but I'm not sure if I put them minus all the time. I think I try to avoid that, especially when it's a lot, but I don't think I've ever really rewarded, made a big deal that, look, they got 2 or they got 5, or they're on the right track or starting. So that was kind of something I thought, I could do that. Like you said, it'll throw kids off if nothing else. It's a shock factor.
Absolutely. One, it's an easy change on your part. And two, it completely changes the perspective and mindset of not only you as an educator, like, you're going to get there. It's that not yet, that growth mindset, right? And then we're looking at the student being empowered as opposed to you failed yet again.
Yeah.
I love that perspective, and it's so easy to do. We're going to talk a lot about feedback today, and we'll come back to the fact that says, and when we review, won't you do better? And I think that gives them motivation rather than, I can't do this, I'm out, I'm going to shut down already. Okay, lots of things in the chat. Students come to school for connections. Absolutely. It may be their safe place. Schools where they find those connections, not only in peers, but in adults as well. And I think it's interesting. Every kid needs a champion, but they really only need one. And you may be that one person that changes their outlook on education and really helps them get through their days. Positivity spreads, absolutely encourages learning. How much esteem I have in the profession when I was a child and couldn't wait to teach one day. Absolutely. I bet all of you, if I were to say, think of who your champion was, you can connect with somebody. And you can think about that educator that you had that really made you want to be a teacher and be able to do that for other students. Elizabeth goes back to the quote, I am somebody, I was somebody when I came, I will be a better somebody when I leave, I'm powerful, I'm strong. And Elizabeth, you must have watched this video because you have memorized that quote. And yeah, teachers, they buy food, hygiene items, they do things beyond what is expected because they have a care and they create positive relationships with students. So you leave exhausted and tired, and oftentimes you're always being told, oh, you can do this more, you can do this better. But I want you to really think about, you are doing great things every day for kids. And even though sometimes you feel as if change isn't occurring fast enough, or, there's a negative connotation with teaching, you're not being paid enough, all of these things are reasons why, teaching's hard, but the students are why we do the work. And if we think about those students that we're making impactful changes for on a daily basis, it really motivates us to be there for our students and to show up every day with this positive, contagious attitude that is going to help our students learn. And I think that is what Rita Pierson embraces. And anytime you're having a low moment in education, I feel like she's a great pick-me-up. 7 minutes of your time to really change your perspective on the way you're feeling about education right now. So again, I feel like every time I watch that, it just puts me in a better mood, especially on this rainy Thursday morning. Okay, so today, high leverage practices 6 to 4, and it's really looking at supporting not only the academic needs that we've been talking about, and we'll get into in the latter half of the HLPs when we talk about instruction, but it's also talking about those behavioral supports. So that's what we're going to focus on today. The first one, high leverage practice 7, is establishing a consistent, organized, and respectful learning environment. So what we're going to do at this time is just in the chat, kind of think about how are you already creating a consistent, organized learning environment for your students? What are things that are happening on a daily basis? Just waterfall them in. As you get them, go for it. Schedules, absolutely. Expectations, routines. Wonderful. Structure, boundaries, routines and structure. Visual supports and schedules, consistency, so important. Clear expectations. And how are you communicating these clear expectations with students? What are you doing with routines? Greet students by name, absolutely. Check-ins with students. We're posting expectations. Talking about what's next, using visuals. How many of you use a calendar app or use your calendar on your phone, or even some people like the old school paper planners? How many of you utilize a schedule on a daily basis? So I see lots of hands up or nods. We like to know what's going to happen in our day. And we are much more successful when we know what's coming up. When you don't have a plan, how does that make you feel? Lost, stressed, scattered, anxious, out of control. So if students are going into classrooms and there's not consistency and there's not schedules, they are feeling that. As much as we love our schedules, they love their schedules too. We need to have a clear-cut schedule for our day and let students know what's happening next. If I know that reading that is super hard for me ends at 10:30 in the morning, I can get through the next 10 minutes when I know that art's next and I love art. But if I never see an end to that reading, it's really hard for me to be able to persist through that. So having schedules is so important. I love the greeting at the doors because not only are routines and schedules important, it's also important to somehow form those relationships. At the elementary level, what do community circles look like? What do meetings look like? How are we open? How do we teach kids how to treat one another? And is there that mutual respect? Kids don't have to respect us. We have to earn that respect. And so we model that to students. This is how we treat each other, and this is how you're going to treat me. And I think that's so important when we're creating that culture and environment where all students feel like they have a safe place. And how can we be that champion for students? So definitely all things that you're doing in the classroom to help set up success for students for that day. Some of the things that we're going to really spend some time diving into during this hour this morning is looking at what you as a teacher can do, not only to craft that environment, but really to promote positive behaviors in students. So there's things that teachers consistently do that statistically have great results when it comes to improving student behavior. So it has to be focused on the students, the active teaching within the classroom. We need to increase students' opportunities to respond. The more times that students have the ability to respond within the classroom, they're much more engaged in the content that we're teaching. And that provides additional opportunities for us to provide that positive feedback. And we're going to get into the numbers a little bit here when it comes to opportunities to respond and positive feedback. But when the research was done by Terry Scott and his colleagues, they really talked about these three areas. And what they noticed, the teachers that fell in the lowest cluster, meaning not as much active teaching, fewer opportunities to respond, and less positive feedback or corrective feedback within the classroom, had students who were 27% more likely to be off task and 67% more likely to be disruptive. So here's what I'm telling you. If you feel as if the management of your classroom could improve, These are 3 simple areas to up your game so that students can be more successful. And I say this to you all because I know you're not only managing your classroom environments, you're also assisting your general education colleagues to be successful with the students in your class and their classrooms. So I think you need to be able to not only do these things yourself, but help others and be able to communicate these things to others who might be struggling with the management of their classroom. So yes, schedules, very important. Yes, routines. When students aren't performing, we reteach all of those things, but these 3 things can also help as well. So as we get into HLP8, it's all about the feedback piece. So Holly already noted, we're going to do +2, and we're going to tell students that there's room for growth. And as we look here, opportunities to respond, the more time students are able to respond in a classroom, the higher rate we have to provide feedback to students on a positive level. So these are just some examples. If you want to add to the chat other ways that you're providing opportunities to respond, this is so that we have total response in our classroom. It is not what is the capital of Indiana and you have one student raise their hand and answer the question. It's talk to your neighbor about what that is. That way, instead of one person answering, 23 students are answering at once. It is, okay, everyone respond together. Some of those call outs are great things to get students engaged. It doesn't necessarily have to be content specific to be an opportunity to respond. How are we engaging students? We have response cards. Tell us, is it A, B, or C? And we're all holding them up at the same time. We're writing on whiteboards, whatever that might look like, so that students are responding and not only individually calling on students. Any other strategies that your teachers are using to increase opportunities to respond in the classroom or that you're using? Exit tickets, absolutely. That's a great way to assess quickly and provide that feedback. Jamboard. Every time you start to pose a question in a classroom, I want you to think about some of these strategies and think, am I calling on one student or am I engaging all students in learning? Because what Terry Scott says is we want opportunities to respond to be 3 per minute to really engage our learners. And that's a lot. So if you're sitting down and you're, thinking about your instruction or even have the opportunity to have an observation and get some feedback, it's interesting to take data. How often are you engaging students? If you are consulting with other teachers, how often are they engaging students? We want students to be active in doing something because we know if they're active in their learning, it's going to decrease the inappropriate behaviors within our classroom and really improve academic achievement over time. So here is some information on feedback. And this is some research that was done at both the elementary, middle school, and high school level. And what we want feedback to be is for every 4 positive notes of feedback, the ratio is 4 to 1 from positive to negative. That's what we want to maintain over time. So if you're looking at the elementary level, we're at a 3 to 1 ratio for those who are researched within this study. Middle school, it drops down quite a bit, 1.9 instances of positive feedback. And then by the time you get to the high school level, it is even 1 to 1. So for every positive feedback, they're also getting negative feedback. And I will tell you, negative feedback is telling someone that they got it wrong, but not providing any corrective feedback. So if I say 7 plus 7 is not 13, let's try that again. Take 7 and count up 7 more and see if you get what your answer is. That is providing corrective action. We have to correct students. We have to correct their misconceptions. We have to be able to comment on what's not going well, whether that's academically or behaviorally. If you are providing negative feedback with corrective action, that counts as positive feedback. If you are just providing no, stop, that is negative feedback, just to clarify that a little bit. So anytime you're adding in that corrective feedback, that is good. Continue that. But we really want to look at positive feedback, and it needs to be meaningful and timely and goal-oriented so that students know what we're talking about. It is wonderful to put that smiley face on that paper and put +2. But it does no good if I'm never going back to review what students got right and what they didn't do well on. I have to be able to provide that corrective feedback within there. And I can't just say good job. I need to say good job on what was good. So think about that when you're providing positive feedback within your classroom. One, is it a 4-to-1 ratio? Are you more positive than negative? And if not, how can you intentionally improve upon that? Because these are factors that make all the difference in the world when we're talking about decreasing negative behaviors within the classroom. This is a lot of numbers, but basically it takes the information on the previous chart and it really looks at it per hour, day, month, and year. And what I think is so important about this aspect is when I think I was having a rough day, I was way more negative than positive today. And sometimes you just feel that in your core. And teachers have off days too. It happens. It's allowed. And when you're feeling that way, it's so important to be cognizant of that, because on a day-to-day basis, it's not making that big of a difference. But look at the negative impact of that 4-to-1 ratio not being met on a school year. So at the elementary level, even though they were 3-to-1 on a normal basis, if I'm looking at an entire year, that means that I am negative 2,754 times off of the rate of what we want in order to provide that positive to negative feedback. And at the high school level, negative 6,804 over a school year. So day to day, incrementally, we have to be aware of the feedback that we're providing and recognizing that it adds up quickly over a year's time. I think this is interesting. Another research study, really just to inform your practice. When Terry Scott and a team of teachers or researchers came up with researching in high poverty elementary schools, they found that students who had more opportunities to respond, so any of those activities where students are responding together as opposed to individually, had 260 plus more opportunities to respond, had higher academic achievement. So that in and of itself, when students are more engaged, improves outcomes over time. And that's what we want. We want to improve outcomes for all students, but specifically students with disabilities. And those who had negative feedback without corrective action were more predictive of suspension. So these are things, OTRs and feedback, are two things that teachers can do differently that can really impact our outcomes for students. Teacher behavior impacts student behavior. So if these are the couple of things that you can focus your efforts on for this last semester of school, then outcomes can improve just from these two things. So remember, when we're doing providing more opportunities to respond and providing feedback, we want it to be goal-directed, really informing areas needing improvement, timely, genuine, meaningful, and be really provided at rates at which the tasks are given. 4-to-1 is what we're looking at when we're talking about feedback. How many of you say, I think I probably hit that? Kudos to you. Give me a thumbs up in the chat. Go ahead and give me I hate to do thumbs down, but we'll do thumbs down. Thumbs down in the chat if that's something that you think that you can improve upon. I have some hands raised. Yeah, I think we all can improve upon this, but it's nothing that we don't have the skill set in order to improve. We just have to be mindful of it. Tina, I love it. So if you feel like this is something that you want to see being done really well, I think Tina and Annette, like, look at those thumbs up. Look at those individuals who feel as if they're doing it well, and talk to them. What's working in your classrooms? What's not? HLP 9 is teaching social behaviors. And as special educators, this is something that we are doing probably more consistently than at the tier 1 level. But first, let's talk about what's being done for all kids within MSD Wayne. So how are we teaching social skills? Todd, remind me, are you all still using second steps?
Yes, we are in our elementary and some of our middle schools.
Okay. And is that tier 1, everybody gets it?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. So being able to provide those expectations to everyone, and then think of our RTI triangle. We have second steps for everyone. And then what are we doing in small groups for those who need it? Do we have social skills groups? Do we have lunch bunches? What does that look like? And we're reteaching those skills. And then we're going to have that top tier who need additional, maybe a functional behavior assessment, maybe a behavior intervention plan, in order to really teach what those social skills are. Carly says we're also using zones of regulation. Wonderful. And teaching those to students. And I think what's so important is when we talk about consistent and organized learning environments from HLP 7, this is something that's district-wide across elementaries and school-wide, so that it's the same language, whether I am in Lydia's class or John's class or Carly's class. The conversation is consistent across. It's not like I'm going into a different area and learning something new for each teacher that I have. So the top-down approach, where these are the expectations for our building, this is how we're going to behave even better on a district level, definitely helps create that sense of, I know what's expected of me as a student. One of the activities that I think is really interesting, and if you are co-teaching, this might be something that you want to try. But we talk about having clear expectations in classrooms. And sometimes I do co-teaching trainings, and I have the co-teachers, usually general education and special education teachers, and I have them sit back to back, and I have them write what their classroom expectations are. And it's interesting to me, after they write them, they show each other. And many times teachers who have been working together for years have different lists of expectations, which I think is funny, because if I have two adults in the classroom who are unsure what the expectations are, or the expectations don't match, it's hard for me to expect the students to clearly know what the expectations are. So I think that's something to consider. What are the expectations for everybody? How are we communicating these out? And how are we making sure that teachers are all on the same page when it comes to the expectations school-wide, and then co-teachers classroom-wide as well? What are some of the things that you're doing when students are not meeting social skills and they need maybe additional instruction in order to master that? The high school has a giant lunch with SLPs and OTs. Nice. E-lessons. Skill streaming. Carly, can you tell me more? Do you mind? Oh, it's a program that you use. Okay, nice. I've not heard of that one. Social stories, visuals, restorative practices. Yeah, recommending outside providers. Takes a team with some of our more intense students. SEL coaches, great. So lots of things are in place that you can tap into to help students become successful in social skills. Even just modeling on a daily basis and talking through some of that doesn't have to add very much instructional time, but really can meet the needs of your entire classroom. All right, and the last one we're going to talk about today for HLPs is conducting functional behavior assessments. And as special educators, this is something that I'm sure you're all too familiar with. One of the things I wanted to share with you is, how many of you are familiar with the FBA data analysis worksheet put together by the center? Some hands raised. So the importance of, did you follow my screen? Are you looking at the process? It's coming up. Can you see it with me?
No, we just see the slides still.
Oh, bummer. Okay, sorry, just a second. Interesting. Well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to share it, but I can email you the slides. So as we talk through the FBA and BIP process, one, making sure we have a team. So common practice is making sure that more than just you as the special ed teacher are filling out the information. I think it's so important that we have perspectives from across buildings and across environments. If you as a special ed teacher are the only one collecting data and sharing the information, you're not getting a true picture of that student. Think of our students who have no problems in a science class, but lots of problems in a math class. What's the difference there? Is it teacher personality? Is it something that we can talk through in terms of what is that teacher doing differently that this teacher isn't doing? And how do we use the team to come up with the scenarios where the student's successful and have those conversations? What's working in some environments and how can we replicate that in others? When we're looking at function of behavior, we really want to know the meaning behind why it's happening. And oftentimes, Carly, as I'm sure you're aware, we have 10 behaviors of concern and we're looking at multiple things. We can't tackle all 10 at once. What is that target behavior and how do we define it? So thinking about our data conversations, I know it's been some time and you've had some time off since then, but we had that tally mark of that disruptive behavior, really defining what the behavior is that we're targeting and then coming up with the why behind it. And once we have the why behind it, then we have to come up with replacement skills that we're going to teach the student in order to serve a similar function or the same function to eliminate that behavior that we have. So that's the conversation that you need to be having as a team. What is something that is a replacement skill that can be taught? If the student has outbursts where he's flailing his arms and going after teachers and going after students because he's lost power or lost control of a situation, how do we grant power in a different way, in an appropriate way? How are we teaching those coping mechanisms and what does it look like? Oftentimes we look at instruction for reading and mathematics, and if students aren't able to decode, we provide additional instruction on decoding. If students aren't able to subtract with regrouping, then we provide additional instruction on that. But sometimes with behavior, we get frustrated and upset and it's emotional, and we forget that behaviors also need to be taught. So when you're developing that behavior intervention plan and you're saying that these things need to be taught over time, what does that look like? How do we communicate that with the entire team so that they're putting those instructional strategies in place and that they also have the ability to know what to do when the negative behavior reoccurs? What am I going to do? And how do I create an environment to prevent that from happening? And how do I react when it does happen? What are all those things and how are we communicating this with the team? Because at the very beginning of this conversation, we talked about environments and a couple of you put consistency is what needs to happen. And it needs to be consistency across all of the environments in which the student is served. So something to consider. And I will send this out so that you have access to the data analysis worksheet as well in order to use that. So important considerations across high leverage practices. One, always going back to valuing students' cultural and language backgrounds and experience, not something that's specifically addressed in HLP 6 through 10, but something that you need to have in the back of your mind. What are we teaching and how does it respect and honor the cultural and language differences of students? And then it always needs to be taught. Well-designed, effective instruction for behavior and academics. some additional strategies, and I'm afraid if I click on these, it won't show you. But there are some handouts that you'll have access to when I send you all the PowerPoint. Environmental supports really talks about 6 key factors that you can look at within the environment in order to determine, am I have appropriate pacing for the classroom? Am I creating an environment that's organized and complex? But these are those things that I see as you looking at, and you can check them off your list. Yes, I'm doing that. No, maybe that's something I can improve upon. Or, like I said, handing them to some of your colleagues and say, hey, here's some things to consider about environmental supports. I was on a call yesterday and somebody was like, yeah, but we have people who may not take that so well if I just were to hand them something and say, this is something you can improve upon. And so we talked about sometimes, just like our students, if we need to be taught behaviors or if we're defensive. Oh, you can't see the
I
PowerPoint.
don't think you're
I'm
presenting
so sorry,
anymore.
guys.
Sorry.
Oh.
I just realized I'm engaged listening to you, and then I was like, I bet she's looking at slides.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to fix that handout, and when I couldn't get that to go. Okay, slides are good. I apologize. I'm sorry for that. So the first linked handout is environmental supports, but all of these handouts are things that you could potentially give to other educators that are simple strategies to change, similar to those opportunities to respond that we talked about. Here's ways to improve. And one of the teachers said yesterday that if I do this and if I provide this to the teacher, there's a couple that I know would get very defensive. And I completely understand that. And I think sometimes getting defensive when there is a need for change in the classroom, maybe classroom management isn't going well, is really within that individual telling you, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't think about something else. But what an opportunity for you to say, give me 15 minutes for a mini lesson, increase opportunities to respond in that environment, show some skills at providing those opportunities and giving feedback to students, see if it makes a difference. Maybe even the teacher who you're modeling for can look and start to, even take some data on what's happening in the classroom or how students are responding or not. And then really modeling those skills and allowing that teacher to then start to utilize those skills in the classroom. And I think sometimes if teachers are defensive, it's because they don't have the skill set to do it. And how do we coach on that and teach that? Tap into those SEL coaches within your building as well. So just do it strategies, make it happen strategies, and managing surface behaviors are one pagers that you can take away and really start to utilize those practices tomorrow within your classroom. The last one is supporting and responding to students' social, emotional, behavioral needs. This is more of a larger document, but definitely something that I think is beneficial for those who are conducting FBAs as a team, those who are creating behavior intervention plans. It really helps you think about all of the routines within the buildings that can help students be successful. And it's great for all kids, but it really can hone in on some of those students who aren't responding to the just do it strategies or the make it happen strategies over time. So those are definitely things that you can take back with you and utilize. These are a few of the book resources that we recommend. I'll do a little giveaway at the end as well. I know that MSD Wayne has done some work with Ross Green prior to this session. So, of course, The Explosive Child, I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. But the other books, Teaching Behavior, Managing Classroom Through Effective Instruction, is a Terry Scott text, and it really does reiterate the importance of teaching behaviors. The second book is Teacher and Student Behaviors, and that all comes from, or the data that I used today comes from this book. So when we're talking about opportunities to respond at a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 times per minute, and we're talking about feedback at a 4-to-1 ratio, that research is in there. It just talks so much about how the teacher's behavior really has positive and or negative influences on student behavior. So it is a good one as well. And then when we're digging a little bit deeper for students who need more, whether that be because they have skill deficits or maybe they've encountered things like trauma within their life or they have ACEs, or those types of things where we need to do things differently. Fostering Resilient Learners is a good book resource for that as well. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with CASTLE, really looking at social emotional learning, both at a district level and has resources at the classroom level. They have really good free professional development opportunities that you can have as well. PBIS, you might get in a rabbit hole, but there's lots of good resources on there. One that I wasn't familiar with until recently was PBIS World. So if you have experience with that, but it really is good at getting in and finding specific behaviors. You can click on it and it gives you all of these potential strategies or potential supports. Now, we know that if a student is exhibiting a behavior, functions might be different for the very same behavior, but at least gives you some ideas to consider that you can go on. So PBIS World is definitely a new resource to me, but I think it's one that could be beneficial, like I said, when we're completing functional behavior assessments or behavior intervention plans. So as always, we'll end with some look-fors for behavior in HLP 6 through 10. Establish consistent, organized, and respectful learning environments. We talked about school-wide behavioral expectations that are taught explicitly to students. Again, we have to teach them. Use of a class schedule. Classroom routines are evident and we're teaching them. I find that oftentimes we're really good about teaching routines at the elementary level, and oftentimes that as we get higher through our education in middle school and secondary, we lose sight of some of those routines. So making sure we're teaching them at all levels of instruction, making sure that mutual respect is present, and we have this sense of classroom community. We are here to support one another in our learning, and how do we make that happen day in and day out? Look for positive and constructive feedback. Students are provided with 3 opportunities to respond per minute. That's our goal range. That's where we want to be. Students are provided positive feedback at a rate of 4 to 1 compared to negative feedback. Feedback includes both pre-correction and corrective action. Feedback can be verbal, nonverbal, gestural, or written, but must be goal-directed, timely, and meaningful. When we're teaching social skills, it sounds like you at MSD Wayne have a very good foundation at that tier 1 level. So what does interpersonal skills training look like for all students? And then are we using assessments to determine, or data to determine who needs additional supports, and how are we providing that support to students? Instruction is designed based on these specific skills, and how are we integrating them so that we can generalize those skills over time? And just like our academic data, we're progress monitoring over time to determine if students are progressing, or do we need to change the interventions that are in place. So having those data conversations like we talked about in our last session. And finally, when we're conducting functional behavior assessments, making sure that we have a clearly defined target behavior, where if I'm tracking data on the information, it looks the same as if Patrick's tracking data on the information, or Megan, or anybody else. We know what we're looking for when it comes to that target behavior. We're utilizing a team to determine what's taking place across areas in our environment, making sure we have appropriate replacement skills. We have a behavioral goal in mind. We're developing a behavior intervention plan. How are we teaching these skills, and what are our goals set? We have progress monitoring tools in place, and then we're making adjustments as we need it for these students. I think one last thing that I would like to add before we talk about our upcoming sessions and our giveaway today is really thinking about and considering, prior to any of these HLPs that you can put in place, let's just go back to Rita for a moment and really think about relationships, because it all starts there. And you may do a great job with opportunities to respond and feedback, but if the foundation of the relationships aren't there and students don't feel safe in your space or connected in your space, then the likelihood that negative behaviors will show is much higher than if we have established relationships in the classroom. Here's what I would like for you to do. If you could give me an exclamation point in the chat Let's see. Okay, I need 5 people. So it looks like I have Lori, Wendy, Adeline, Terry, and Lindsay are my first 5. So if you all could send me your mailing address, I will be mailing out one of the 5 resources. The one that I don't have is the Ross Green text. So I won't be providing that, which you may already have that since those are district initiatives. But the one that I'm going to throw in its place is a Terry Scott and Todd Whitney book about 14 engagement strategies to really increase those opportunities to respond. So I'm going to add my email into the chat. Go ahead and email me and your mailing address, and we'll get those out this week. The next thing that I want to talk about is our next session is all going to be really focused on specially designed instruction. This is our last session, and I will tell you that the rest of the HLPs are all on instruction. We won't have time to dive into them at a more than a surface level. What we're going to do is I'm going to introduce those to you and then talk about how do we make sure that we're utilizing these strategies within our specially designed instruction, and what does specially designed instruction truly look like for students within our settings. So that will be for our next session. Are there any questions for today?
Everyone, before you leave, please make sure you click on the link in the chat to fill out the exit ticket for today. Provide us feedback, and then also that will confirm your attendance today. But any questions for Marcy?
And Todd, I will be emailing you these slides so that people can get to those links.
Great.
And then if you could stay on with me, I'll figure out how to navigate that for our afternoon session. I apologize about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And everybody, as always, this will be uploaded in the OSS Hub, so you can access all that information. And that will be up by tomorrow when we send the newsletter out.
Thank you all. Enjoy your few extra minutes of your day and have a good one.
Have a great day, everybody.
Todd, I'm going to try this again right now, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Hey, could you please
the exit ticket?
Yeah, I got kicked out. Could you please repost that if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, I'm going to post the original Google link. That may be the problem.
Yeah, it's like kicking me out every time I open it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Could be. Yep, no problem.
How about now, Todd? Can you see it?
I do. What can I do? I'm not the behavior specialist.
Yeah, but do you see environmental supports?
I do. Yep.
Okay. I must have just been sharing a window and not my screen.
Got it.
All right. Apologize about that. We'll get it fixed for this afternoon, though.
No problem. Thank you, Marcy.
Have a good one. I'll see you later.
All right. We'll see you later.